Vice President. Anna is indisposed and not able to be with us tonight. Just a few things about the group in case you haven't been here before. We are a volunteer membership organization dedicated to the betterment of our community. Any resident of the village of Port Jefferson School District, or Port Jefferson Fire District is eligible to become a voting member. To be able to vote, one has to have attended at least 3 association meetings and paid the annual membership dues of $20. By the way, if you paid, what is it, Marilyn? Last year.
If you paid last year,
you're
correct.
due to pay again this year. The cutoff date was July. And please sign in. I think most of Maryland has dutifully called everyone around, and most people have signed in. We're grateful to the Port Jefferson Library for providing us with this meeting space. And I would like to extend a warm welcome to our elected officials, both at the table or going to be at the table. And other people also have a local newspaper journalist, Ben Hallerman, who's with us today. Yay! Yay! And our main topic today is going to be water and erosion. And I think we've seen in recent events, the past couple of months, we've seen way too much erosion for one little village. So that will be very topical. Bob Green will be speaking about that. George Hoffman will be speaking about the water quality. And our Suffolk County representative and geologist, a geologist by training, Steve Englebright, will speak about that as well. And we'll have a question and answer period after they have finished their presentations. Before we hear from them, we have 2 of our officers are going to give very short reports, and Barbara is going to discuss a couple of events as well. Okay, so as Vice President, I'm also on the tree committee, and I see there's at least one other member of the tree committee here. So I wanted to tell you about a couple things that are coming up. One is that the tree committee has decided to have a year of the tree, which would start, some of you have heard about this already and some of you not. It would start on Arbor Day, which is in April 2025. We would like to get every aspect of the village, every group, the businesses, the residents, especially the school kids, on every level, any other groups like Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, Garden Club, any group can be involved, and we hope that everyone will be involved. So we'd like to go through the academic year of 2025-26, and we will be a whole year from Arbor Day in April of 2025 all the way till the next year of Arbor Day. So that gives time for everybody to think about, wow, what could we do about that? Maybe it could be part of the 4th of July parade, the little doggy Easter parade, or whatever. Dogs can be trees too, whatever. You know, use your imagination. So you will be hearing a lot more about that if you run a business here. It would be cool to have like a tree theme. Cakes, I don't know, whatever. Or obviously with clothing or anything like that. Okay, the second thing I wanted to quickly mention, since I am on the tree committee, I'm also the president of EcoLead, which is a small environmental group from Port Jefferson, is that this is the time of year when the lawns come back into your mind, right? But now it's the leaves on the lawns. And everybody, I used to pay $400. I've got a pretty small lot. $400 to have all those leaves either blown onto the street or blown into my backyard, and sometimes I was paying to take them all away to be mulched. And I just want you to know there's an alternative to all this obsession with the leaves. And there's 2 things you can do. And both are very good for nature, for the plants, and for the insects that we all enjoy. Butterflies, especially fireflies. My backyard used to have tons of fireflies. And now I see 1, 2, 3 blinks, right? And that's it. Okay, so one way to encourage the beneficial insects is to leave the leaves that are already on your garden. You don't have to get people to blow them off. I'm sorry. I have a pretty good voice, but I just, okay. You have to keep pushing. Is this better? Yes. Okay. Ah, now you can hear me better. Okay. So leave the leaves. I suggest that you leave the leaves on your garden plots. A lot of us have the edge to the driveway or something along the back fence. All of those leaves harbor the eggs of beneficial insects. Also the pollinators, because we have a lot of ground pollinators. As you know, the only bees that we have that live in hives are the Eurasian honeybees, and there's not many of them around unless you are a beekeeper and you provide a place for them. Okay, so that really saves a lot, because in the spring you already have a mulch on your garden, right? And I tried this. I have so much less weeding to do. It's a natural mulch. You don't have to buy it, and you don't know what is in the mulch that you buy from a nursery, right? There can be lots of pollutants in there, heavy metals. We don't even know. Okay, and the other thing you can do is forget about the blower. You can even forget about the rake if that was your exercise or whatever. The mower can mulch your leaves to a small size. And the only thing you need to do is that sometimes you can just leave it. If it falls down amongst the blades of grass, good, right? That's nutrients for the next year's grass. And the other thing you can do is if you get little, rows or hills of it, you can rake some of it up, throw it on your compost pile, and you're all set for the next year. So I'm just suggesting a way to save money, help nature, and make a more beautiful garden with the butterflies and the fireflies. Okay, so now we have Marilyn, who is our treasurer, and who's going to give us another update. Okay. So, all right. Hello. This one isn't go.
Okay. So, is this better?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hold it close. Hold it close.
So basically what I'd like to do is give you a balance of our accounting. We have approximately $1,253.44. We are looking to, like Holly had mentioned, for you to renew your membership, please. It is a $20 contribution, so we do appreciate it. We have approximately 62 members at the moment, so bear that in mind. I also would like to talk about just the framework of one of our committees that we're working with. Janice, myself, and Schwartzing, Michael Schwartzing is part of that committee as well. And basically what we're trying to do is frame the walkability study. We have right now plans, they're pretty much engineering report as to what sidewalks are going to possibly be put up, but we are also getting some feedback just informally as to, well, what will that do? Will some residents complain that their property that they are keeping nice and cultivated they're going to have a sidewalk there and be responsible for that? That's just some of the informal feedback that I have heard. So Janice, Michael, and myself, we're framing this particular walkability group. And we also want it to be more encompassing. We need to look for things like funding in order for us to put posters up. We're trying to look at the streets that have sidewalks, the streets that don't have sidewalks. What are the conditions of those streets? And it's going to be a long process. But it is something that needs to be initiated because some walking groups do have a problem. And I personally do not know where all the sidewalks are. So that's something, again, it's being framed. So if something's important to you, please let us know and we can prioritize our efforts, okay? Let's see. I think that's it. Okay, so if you have any questions, if you have any questions, any commentary even, please send it my way and we can put that towards our committee.
I should add that for the tree committee, I would be very glad to speak to anybody who wants to take part in the year of the tree. We're already looking at different proposals, ideas, and so on. Now we have Barbara, who wants to speak about a couple of events going on in the village.
First of all, if you'd like, this weekend is the Harvest Festival here in the village of Port Jefferson. There's flyers here. It's 2 days, full schedule, lots of things happening, lots of nice things, very family oriented. We're gonna have harvest walkers, we're gonna have hay rides, by tractor pull, the costume dog parade.
Oh, the
and
costume
chowder-
dog parade.
costume
Oh.
dog parade. The chowder ball, which is almost sold out. So, it's a lot of fun, a lot of nice things that are happening, plenty of roasters up there. I belong to a grassroots organization called UCAN, United Community Action Network. It is to address bias crimes, particularly on the North Shore corridor, and we are having a unity rally. If anybody wants to join us, it's apolitical, it's just that we are here all together. It's Sunday, November 24th, and we are going to be on the, right by, it's on the corner of 347 and Route 112, right by the Bank of America. Okay, we're not by the train card, we're on the opposite side. We're on the southwest side of that intersection. Only for an hour, from 2 to 3, so if you want to join us, we're standing with individuals who have experienced bias-motivated actions, and it's just a unity rally, all are welcome.
But Barb, is that like, is there a place for people to even stop their car?
We don't want you to stop your car, we want you to wave to you.
Oh, that.
No, yeah, one of those. It's like what they do on the corner down on 25A. You got one side and then the other side. You know? We're just all on one side that day. Okay, so it's just a unity rally.
Why couldn't you have it on the other side that has that
Because I
part?
choose not to, for many reasons, and I'll have that conversation with you, Molly, afterwards. So, I'm a Chamber of Commerce person, and that really bothers the Chamber a lot. Terryville, and Port Station. So, P.S. This is another, if anyone wants to take one of these flyers to put up in their business or whatever, or church, all are welcome. We are all are welcome. Again, this is our logo here. So this is just something nice to have. And lastly, the town of Brookhaven is having an interface Thanksgiving food drive. So it's from October 14th to November 15th. There's all these different places. I'll leave this up front where you can drop off food. You know, I know we're all very generous, but there's just another way you can be generous. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you, Barbara. I also just want to let people know there's some voting materials up here. I think voting registration form and other materials about some of the candidates. Okay, George Hoffman is going to speak to us. He's from the Three Village Civic Association. What is your?
Suffolk Harbor Task Force.
Oh, okay. I got the wrong information from Anna. Okay, but I think you wear several hats.
I did.
Okay. All right. Would you like to come up?
I would. Yeah, very much so.
Good evening, everyone.
Hello, George.
My name's George Hoffman, and I'm with the Suffolk Harbor Task Force. As Holly said, I do wear several hats in the community. But tonight I'm here for the Suffolk Harbor Task Force. And we're a clean water volunteer group, and we've been doing water testing in Port Jefferson and Suffolk Harbor for the last 7 years now. And we're part of a larger organization called Save the Sound. It's a bi-state organization that helps to improve water quality in Long Island Sound on both the Connecticut shore and the New York shore. And last Thursday, they released their report card for 2023. And Port Jefferson Harbor scored 3 out of the top 5 positions as the best harbors in terms of water quality out of 57 harbors in the Long Island Sound. That was really remarkable. A lot of it has to do with just the geography of the harbor. You know, I wish all of us could take credit for why it's doing so well. It's a, you know, very well flushed harbor. The residence time of the water in the harbor is only a day or two, so it's kind of like, you know, it just flushes out and then it's dissolved into the sound. But we've done a lot of stuff, you know, in terms of controlling stormwater and controlling, you know, waterfowl. And so, you know, we're working hard. We've done a lot of construction to make sure that the water doesn't run from the street into our harbor. So I wanted you to all know that. We have a group that's pretty interesting. We have all volunteers. We go out at sunup 2 times a month from May to October. So we're out there in the dark, and we have a computer that's lent to us by the EPA, and we do water quality readings. So we're looking for the chemicals in the, you know, what we call water chemistry. So we're looking at dissolved oxygen, we're looking at chlorophyll, we're looking at turbidity. These are all the elements that make a harbor sustainable so that all our marine life is you know, sustaining. It's not too much seaweed. So I thought that that was really important news to let you all know what we're doing. About 2 years ago, we grew kelp in the harbor. So that was one of our pilot projects where we grow kelp during the winter on long lines that we put out almost by, I think it was on Whitehall Beach. And once it's, you know, we raised about 400 pounds, and it's then dried and it's turned into fertilizer. And this is probably one of the best fertilizers you can get for your lawn. So we've been doing that. And I think this year we're working with the Suffolk Indians. They would like to do, they're going to take over the kelp from us. They're going to be doing it off the Poquat shoreline. So we're really interested in that. So thank you very much, Holly.
Thank you, George.
Thank you, George, and where can we get? Oh, I'm sorry, question? Oh, where does it go? Okay.
Give the mic.
I was just wondering, from DVR, I was just wondering about if you had any information about the impacts of the dredging that you're planning on doing in the harbor, whether that's going to impact the water quality at all, and what about the kelp farm? Does that affect that at all?
I don't know. Can't hear a word.
You
I
have to
guess the
talk into
question
the
was,
mic.
do I know anything about the dredging? I guess that's going to be on the outer, what was it, the outer part of the harbor by Port Jeff Marina, because it's gone pretty shallow there. We don't know a lot about it. I think they just awarded the contract. It won't affect kelp because we're not in the water this year, but we hope to be in next year. That shouldn't affect water quality anyway. You know, I know that they have to do a testing of where they put the spoil. So when they dredge out that channel, which is, I guess they call it the north wall of the marina, I think is where they're doing the actual dredging when you come out of the marina. They'll test the dredge spoils, and if it's heavy, you know, with chemicals, then they won't be able to, you know, they're going to have to dispose of it in a safe and benign way.
One more question. How did Mount Sinai fare in these studies?
So, Mount Sinai is not part of the program. We're always looking for volunteers. There's 57 harbors, but a couple like Stony Brook Harbor, there's no one doing water testing there. You know, we set it up 7 years ago because we wanted to do Setauket Harbor and Port Jefferson Harbor. So I don't know what the water quality is. It could be different because of the flushing capability of the Long Island Sound. And also, you know, what we're finding, the biggest problem we're having in the harbor right now is bacteria. And that comes from road runoff, it comes from waterfowl, it comes from pet waste, and hopefully not the boaters, but we have some suspicion sometimes that the boaters, you know, even though they have a really great pump out service to town, sometimes the boaters aren't as diligent as they should be. So.
Thank you, George, and I just wondered, where can we get some of that great fertilizer? Or buy it.
When we start growing it again next year.
Okay,
And
well,
I'll
let us
put you
know.
in touch with them. Yeah.
Okay, great. Then we have Rob Grimm. Oh, no. That's why we have to take him.
Hello. Good evening. Thank you for having me here to speak about the Citizens Commission on Erosion.
Just
Is
talk
the green
into
light
it.
on?
Hello?
Yeah.
Yeah,
There
that's
you
good.
go. Okay. Commission started meeting in August, and we meet every Thursday at the Country Club. Currently, we have 24 members on our email list, and usually 11 to 14 members attend our meetings. The meetings are open to all village residents, and we welcome new members. The Commission is charged with researching, discussing, and providing the Board of Trustees with our thoughts and opinions on the East Bluff Stabilization Project and other issues related to stormwater resiliency. The first topic we worked on was the proposed Coastal Technologies pilot program, which, if successful, would be used to replant the area of Phase 1 that was damaged in last winter's storms. Coastal Technologies would install cliff stabilizer units that would protect the new plantings while root systems develop and grow. The stabilizers would be removed once the plants develop deep root systems. Coastal Technology is a local company who completed a small bluff restoration project at Sands Point Preserve about 2 years ago. The section of the bluff where the technology was used appears to have withstood last winter's storms. After studying the proposal and completing other research, the majority of the Commission voted to support the pilot program. The Board of Trustees decided to table this pilot until additional information could be obtained, and also I believe it's getting too late to plant right now. So this week we'll start a discussion on what Brookhaven Town's responsibility related to bluff erosion and water protection is. We are also looking into what other towns on Long Island are doing to help support villages with this costly problem. Some members have signed up to attend the Suffolk County Coastal Resistance Forum and Field Trip on Tuesday, October 29th in Riverhead. We will hear presentations from state, regional, local partners about planning the sea level rise, coastal monitoring, resilience technology, and case studies. The attendees will also visit the Iron Pier Beach Maidstone Landing to view and learn about the community's bluff restoration project, which they all got together and did themselves with just stuff from Home Depot. Should be very interesting to see it. I can't wait. If the bluff stabilization project and the village's other stormwater issues interest anyone, please feel free to sit into our meetings, or you can join our committee by going on the village's website and hitting the tab Volunteer Make a Difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob.
Thank you, and we're going to have a question and answer after. So we have one more speaker, that's Stephen Englebright, Suffolk County Legislator and eminent geologist. And then we can have a question and answer session.
Thank you very much. So let me just begin by saying that there is a very dynamic shore face that I want to talk about and give you the big picture, and then sort of hone in on some of the circumstances that are more local. But without having the big picture in mind, I think we're all at a disadvantage. So I hope you can all see this map. This is the North Shore of Long Island. This part here goes out to about Lower Place. And this is the rest of the North Fork. So to see this in a linear form, you would essentially cut this in half and glue the lower part to the upper part. And then you have a chance to see all of the island. What I want to point out is, again, to give you the big picture, is that the western half of the North Shore is very irregular, dominated by peninsulas and very deep indentations that are the harbors of the North Shore. And the eastern half of the North Shore is very smooth, with no significant harbors. It's quite a contrast. So how did it get this way? Did the glacier do all of this? Actually, the glacier did a good deal of it, but a lot of what we see along, especially the eastern half of the North Shore, is the result of erosion. So, the big picture again. So we have the peninsulas and deep embayments of the harbors of mostly Nassau County and into Queens. The North Shore goes all the way, of course, to Astoria by the Hell's Gate Bridge. We have Smithtown Bay, and then a very smooth section over here. What I wanted to impress upon you is that this smooth section is a result of the overall geometry of the sound. That would be the coast of Connecticut. This would be the Long Island Sound. In pinches here, that's the Hell's Gate Bridge. Hell's Gate because the tides are constricted there, and well, it's very difficult if you're trying to navigate this. And during the Revolutionary War, a British payroll ship went down here. If any of you want to get rich quick, you can go there and see if you can fight the tide. But there are whirlpools here. The prevailing wind is primarily the effect of the seasonal changes. So the prevailing wind in the winter comes out of the northwest. The term I want you to think about for a moment is the wind fetch. Fetch is the distance across open water that wind can blow. The maximum fetch then for the Long Island Sound is not in this more constricted area, but in fact is the eastern half. So the waves that are set up drag along the North Shore. They build up, and by the time they get to about Crane Neck Point in Oldfield, the waves are at their maximum height. Along with the wave sets that transmit down the length of the sound, you have longshore drift. That is to say that the southern portion of each of these waves drags along the shore, and that builds up and is especially effective in the greatest part of the fetch in the eastern half of the North Shore. So the overall prevailing movement of both erosion and sand is in an easterly direction along the North Shore. I say prevailing. There are local circumstances where there are variations to this, but that's the big picture. Why is this significant? It's significant because Port Jefferson is pretty much at the hinge between the western half of the North Shore and the eastern half. So we really are at the doorstep, if you will, of the greatest amount of erosion of the entirety of the North Shore. The bluffs here then have not always been smooth. I would like to submit to you that the entirety of the North Shore used to look pretty much like the western half of the North Shore. And so what's missing here, I'll go to another color, they gave me more than one color. So what's missing are the peninsulas. That gives you some idea of how much erosion has occurred. This is miles from the original northernmost part of these peninsulas down to where they are now. We have some remnants of some of these where there are little pockets of salt marsh along the North Shore. These are the equivalent of the inner pockets that are still there but that are attached to Hempstead Harbor or Huntington Harbor. So the reason I want you to get the big picture is that this is a very unstable shoreline. And the basic premise of stabilizing it for a particular given property is mission impossible. Because any given little property is part of a larger dynamic that is something that is referred to as a beheaded headland.
Oh, jeez.
This is more and more unappealing.
Very Halloween.
Someone should be there for Halloween.
Just in time for Halloween.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's what has happened here. All of these headlands have been cut back by erosion, and they are now beheaded headlands. In fact, the entirety of the eastern half of the North Shore is one continuous beheaded headland. The sediment itself stands vertically in part because of the way in which the sand grains were laid down. The sand grains were imbricated, which means that they were stacked so that these were meltwater streams of glacial ice melting and sending streams forward, and the sand in those streams was jostled by the flowing of the water, so that the sand grains effectively were fitted into the edges of one another. That's the imbrication. That gives the bluffs the ability to stand vertical. But they're not cemented together. They're just sort of jostled into position by the original mode of deposition. That means that you can have a bluff 100 feet tall standing more vertical than the angle of repose. The angle of repose for loose sand is about 30 degrees. There are many places along the North Shore eastern bluffs where you're at a very steep vertical shore face. And that's due to the imbricated deposition that the sand grains have. If you disturb the sand grains, because they're not cemented together, and it doesn't take much to disturb them, like a hurricane, for example. So they come apart pretty easily then. And if you are looking at a bluff, and you have water running down the bluff, you can build an alluvial fan. I think it's 2 L's. An alluvial fan. So you'll find that there are places all along the North Shore where streams have cut downwards toward the beach, removing sediment in a process called headward erosion. As it cuts backwards, it's counterintuitive because the sand is going this way, being carried by water, but the gully is going that way, deeper into the landform. All of that sediment then ends up in a landlocked delta on the beach. That's the alluvial fan. It's not imbricated, not very well anyhow, and it's very loose, and the next big storm usually takes it away. Over time, this causes the North Shore to retreat. We have examples of studies that have been done. I brought with me a copy of USGS Professional Paper 82, published in 1914, written by Myron Fuller. It's still the masterwork. It's called The Geology of Long Island, and it's masterfully done. he identifies some of the processes that cause the retreat of the North Shore. Amongst those processes are landslips. So in addition to erosion, there's another sort of subset of things that happen, which is due to the actual sedimentology and variations of the sediments that are inside of the bluffs and at the base of the bluffs. Most particularly in the plates that he has within this masterwork of Long Island geology, he shows along the North Shore that there is clay of late Mesozoic time, Cretaceous clay, that was scooped up by the glacier as it moved south and bulldozed into position all along the North Shore. The clay that he has mapped, he did very detailed field mapping, shows clay at the base of the cliffs from College Point, that's next to the LaGuardia Airport, from College Point to Rocky Point. Clay at the base of the bluffs. Is it a uniform thing? No, because the clay is really displaced clay. It was in the Long Island Sound. The glacier froze the sediments of the Long Island Sound as it crossed that basin, pushed with an unstoppable amount of force, pushed chunks of clay into position and embedded them into the glacial moraine, the moraine being the terminal position of the ice sheet. We know that the clay is here because in 1904, a piece of the North Shore called the Great Landslip let loose about a mile of shore length just east of where the local power plant is now in Northport. And that chunk of sediment inland about between an eighth and a quarter of a mile, all of that as one mass of earth just slid into the Sound one day with a whole series of what are referred to as normal faults. A normal fault in this case would be, this is the bluff, down to sea level here. A displacement like this with a relative motion on both sides of the fault line. So this is the fault. That's a real problem. To give you an idea, did it only happen once? Does anybody know where Garvey's Point Museum is in Nassau County? Some of you do. Okay, it's the major natural history museum in Nassau County. It's on Hempstead Harbor. It's in the city of Glen Cove. They built the museum on one of these. And it's moving toward the harbor. That's current. You can go there and walk from the front door of the museum toward the Hempstead Harbor, and you'll go down a series of steps. Each of those is the top of a normal fault. At the harbor, there is clay at the base of the bluff. This is not a tall bluff. This one's relatively small. It's my wife. Yes, I did feed the dog. I'll have to tell her that later. The clay, and I'm going to leave Myron Fuller's plates available for you to glance. I'm going to leave it on the table here. This is too fragile to pass around. The paper's becoming brittle now since 1914. But the clay that is the ultimate culprit in the instability of these bluffs is being extruded like toothpaste upwards. It's no longer frozen by a glacier. It is plastic, and it deforms plastically. And so there and all along the North Shore, where there is clay that is subjected to differential weighting and unweighting, you can get this effect. Nearby to us, I'll give you an example of where I know there's clay. In Poquat on 25A, as you drive from Setauket, just before you get into Port Jefferson, on the south side of 25A, there's a wooded area, that's a Suffolk County park. It's a wet woodland. Wet, it's 100 feet above sea level. Why is it wet? Because there's clay just below the surface. And that little pond that you see there, that's a perched pond. Perched meaning it's higher, it's like a swimming pool. You know, your swimming pool is got a pond in it, and it's higher than the water table. The size of that chunk of clay, I know, goes back into Setauket in one direction, and in an unknown direction, unknown amount into the direction of Port Jefferson. So these chunks of clay are city block and multiple city block sizes of chunks of clay. They just add to the instability of the bluffs. When do they really move? They move when the alluvial fans that accumulate and fatten the beach due to headward erosion, when a storm removes that weight and takes it away. And in the winter, when there's no evapotranspiration to speak of, because the trees are dormant, the meltwater from snow and accumulated rain just is absorbed by the sediments, and the sediments fill with water. The team up to see me. And it gets really heavy, and it's over-steepened, and the toothpaste extrusion effect takes place. If there's clay there, and even if there's no clay, you can have landslips that are measurable. The rate of erosion, according to the subsequent studies that have been done, 2 of them were led by DeWitt Davies, who was a deputy planner, worked under the late Lee Koppelman, the regional planning czar for Suffolk and Nassau. He was the Suffolk County planner. And he had the wisdom to hire DeWitt Davies after Davies in 1972 completed his master work, which has been published by NOAA and Sea Grant in 1974, the Davis, Axelrod, and O'Connor. That is a study entitled Erosion of the North Shore of Long Island. It further documents the processes that are identified in Fuller's work. So we have, from a geomorphological perspective, we have a really dynamic coast. According to Davies, Axelrod, and O'Connor, the overall rate of recession along this entire reach is approximately 1 foot per year. And Davies took a particular look at the Crane Neck site, and the erosion rate there is about 3 feet per year. So what does this all mean? It means that we really have to ask some serious questions when we get involved with spending millions of dollars. One question that I'm going to move from geology for a moment. I'll come back to it if you have questions, and talk political stuff for a minute. First, I just want to make an observation. I have great respect for the fact that the property that has the country club on it and a golf course, I have great respect for the fact that the current mayor's family and her father essentially did a heroic thing in acquiring 202 acres in the late 1960s. You could have asked for a greater benefit to this community than, in a proportional sense, I think it's probably proportional. If you look at all of New York State, the Adirondack Park, and then compare it in a proportional manner to Port Jefferson, that the Port Jefferson properties from the beachfront all the way up to the border with Belterre really represent the equivalent magnitude as a percentage of all of the land of the village. It was a heroic acquisition and a wise one. Along with that acquisition of open space came some buildings. And so one of the questions that has to come to the fore is what to do, because the building, which was not built by the mayor, the building was unwisely placed too close to the bluff when it was built, prior to the acquisition process. And the relentless retreat of the North Shore, you see the big picture, even on a year-to-year basis, that places that particular structure in harm's way. Is it in a catastrophic harm's way? I don't have X-ray eyes. I can't look into the bluff to tell you whether the clay that may be there or the layers of silt that behave plastically as well are a problem. I can tell you though that it is unstable because it's part of a shore face of 50 miles that is unstable. And so with a population base of about 8,500 people, the question of can you get grants to buy time for the short term? Because in the long term, it's going to be more than just tennis courts that are going to be in harm's way. And that's just looking at, taking a look at aerial photographs. We have aerial photos back into the 1920s. It's pretty clear that there will be continued instability of the North Shore. And this is part of that North Shore. If you're planning for forever to spend, and I think we've spent already something like $5 million, do the math, with 8,500 people into 5 million, it's already a significant investment. Much of that investment has already been at least partially compromised in just a couple of seasons. We've had pretty good demonstration of the instability caused by an overheated ocean in terms of extratropical storms in modern times. It's not brand new. The hurricane of '38, you should take a look at the historic photographs of the September 28, 1938 storm that slammed into not just West Hampton. The storm's epicenter came over West Hampton with 20-foot waves that there was no hurricane warning system at all then. Our first knowledge of the hurricane of '38 was from the seismograph at Fordham University that picked up what they thought was a earthquake in eastern Long Island. It was the waves breaking. The waves were more than 20 feet high. That same storm impacted the North Shore. Take a look at what happened at the Oldfield Lighthouse. So, in addition to the relentless annual erosion, there are storm events. And the storm events are, much like the clay, unpredictable. In the political world, we like predictability. Unpredictability causes us to break out in a rash. The instability of the bluffs is not something that is able to easily be controlled. And the frequency and intensity of the storms is increasing. The hurricane of '38 was a Category 3. It took the windmill blades from the windmill in Southampton and deposited those windmill blades in New Hampshire.
Oh,
So
wow.
that was a Cat 3.
Wow.
We saw a Cat 3 strike twice in the southeastern part of our nation just within the last month. The hurricane of '38 wasn't seen coming toward Long Island because we didn't have a series of satellites circulating. We had no way to really track what was seen as a hurricane that bounced off of the coast of Florida and was thought to be lost at sea. Instead, it followed a high pressure zone along the east coast and slammed into West Hampton. Could this happen again and affect the Port Jefferson property? I think you have to take a look at the trend. The trend since just 1938 is one of increased frequency and intensity because these storms are being fueled by an ocean that has absorbed an awful lot of global heat. So within that context, tough decisions have to be made. And there is an array of possible actions. I would like to suggest that one thing that would probably be useful would be to look to the State Environmental Quality Review Act, SEQRA. SEQRA calls for an environmental impact statement for major projects. What does an environmental impact statement give you? It gives you a chance to hear not just from engineers. Engineers will always tell you they can build anything. It gives you a chance to hear from coastal geomorphologists, from coastal geologists, from everyone, civics. And under the State Environmental Quality Review Act, doing an environmental impact statement will give you a series of choices and subject those to the scrutiny of a public hearing. That's called transparency. I think before the next $5.5 or so million is spent, it might be useful to have an environmental impact statement and to consider all of the possibilities. I can tell you this, I have met with your mayor, and she is doing her homework. She is very cautiously examining as much, like a sponge, is absorbing as much information as possible. So I salute your father, and I salute you, Madam Mayor. I think you've got a tiger by the tail in terms of this issue, but it's perhaps a useful thing to continue the process of information gathering, considering that the population base that might have to support additional expenditures is relatively small. So that's my thoughts for this evening. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Steve Englebright, and now we'd like to ask for questions. I'm going to bring the microphone.
Thank you, Steve. This was incredibly informative. Is there any value to trying to seed at the top of the bluff edges? As I recall, they used to have planes flying across the ridges of our North Shore, depositing pine tree seeds, and they did it every year. Does that even work, is my question.
Everything can work a little bit. Just understand, you know, it's physics. If you take and have a big storm and it takes away the alluvium at the base of the bluffs, it destabilizes the bluffs, and they are reset by runoff. Some of the effects of that are really dynamic, and I wrote a paper, in fact, on a heavily vegetated portion of the bluffs near Friar's Head, called the Grandifolia Sandhills, where there's a pygmy forest growing on the bluffs. I'd be happy to provide you with a copy of my paper, but the long and short of it is that Fagus grandifolia, which is American beech, naturally established itself on the bluffs something like 12 to 14,000 years ago, when the whole region was a tundra, because the great ice front had retreated only back to the Connecticut shore, more or less. And so we still had Arctic-like conditions here, and the pioneer plants, one of them, a bird must have brought a seed in of an American beech. American beech is a very plastic organism, and it established itself and economized as it grew, only 6 feet tall. So the gene pool, if you will, of that species is such that it can live in very harsh environments and will send most of its energy into expanding a root pattern, much like potatoes, all growing together. And there's a whole forest that's really in one tree, all interconnected. And as the climate warmed by about 8,000 years ago, the trees grew from having to be diminutive in size, they grew to full size until the bluffs cut back. And the bluffs cut back under the trees, and in the absence of the nutrients and with the stress brought to that portion of this large population, they went to pygmy form again. That's on the bluff, just past Bating Hollow. So there's some really cool things about studying the North Shore's vegetation. For many years, Good and Good from Princeton, husband and wife team, had studied the pygmy forest and identified it as one of only 3 like it in the world. But they didn't understand the geology part. The geology part is that its current pygmy form is due to the loss of the sediments underneath the trees due to erosion. So even if it's heavily vegetated, the erosion continues. And that's what the pygmy trees tell us.
What is your best concept of what we can do with our particular situation here in Port Jefferson? But you have vast, amazing knowledge. We need to learn as much as we can.
So there's no single answer.